Well, thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for coming.
On this lovely evening.
Brand new special for you.
Yeah. I started out my day touring a lot of the flood damage. So it was really devastating. I mean, you know, as you know, you can't really appreciate it until you see it. And I really, it's quite extraordinary what happened here. So it's a great reminder of all the work we got to do. So it's been raining all day wherever I've been, but hopefully tomorrow they say the sun's going to break through. So thanks for carving out, that's what I heard of things. Thanks for carving out the time from your meeting to give me an opportunity to talk to you. You know, I think it's up to the Democratic Party to actually save this country. I really do, if you think about what's going on in this country right now. It is really in our hands to save this country. And 2020 is the election when we have to do it. There's a lot of things that are going to be on the ballot in 2020, in my opinion. One of the things that is going to be on the ballot is a sense of decency and morality and restoring that to our politics. Because it's missing right now. And it's particularly missing from the Oval Office. Right? We need to get back to this notion that our president is doing things out of a sense of a true moral compass. Right? Because that at its core is what's missing with this person in the Oval Office. And I believe that's going to be on the ballot. The other thing that's going to be on the ballot, in my opinion, because the American people are craving it, is this notion of restoring a sense of common purpose to who we are as a people, which I actually believe is the beating heart of this nation. This notion that we're all in it together, that we're working towards the same goals, that we achieve our full potential when we work together. I believe that's also going to be on the ballot in 2020. Because right now I believe we have someone in the White House who in many ways is the divider-in-chief. I think he wakes up every day and tries to figure out how to divide the American people, how to pit an American against another American. Messages to the American people that your enemy is somehow your fellow American because they have a different color of their skin, or because they worship a different God, or God forbid they're in a different political party. We know that's not true. And in my opinion, it's up to the Democratic Party to step forward and remind the American people that we're actually all in this together. That doesn't mean we agree with each other on everything. We don't want to live in a country where we agree with each other on everything. That would be terrible. But the American people deserve to live in a nation where things we don't agree with each other on are debated in an honest, truthful, respectful, and civil manner. They used to call it the battle of ideas, where we seek the right answer. Not the Democratic answer, not the Republican answer, but the right answer. That's what we have to get back to. But the American people also deserve to live in a country where every once in a while our elected officials roll up their sleeves and actually sit down and start getting things done. Things that matter to everyday Americans. Things that matter to our children, my children, your children, the next generation of Americans. Because that's where we've really fallen as a nation. We've watched this world change so dramatically over the last 20 or 30 years. Because of incredibly powerful forces, the devices you have in your hands. These things are 120 million times more powerful than all the computers that we use to send someone to the moon. Think about that, one device. The world has become completely interconnected globally. The last 50 years, we've gone from a world where 25% of the world is interconnected to 90%. These things have fundamentally changed everything in our society. They're changing our economy. They're changing the jobs of the future. They're changing our security risks. They're changing how we interact with each other as human beings. And the question is, have we as a society, as an organized, civilized, presumably progressive society, done the things we should have done to prepare our citizens and our country for this world? The answer is absolutely not. Have we updated our healthcare system? right, to a point. I think one of my 4 daughters might have 20 jobs in her life. Doesn't make any sense to have your health care tied to your job. My dad was a union electrician. He had one job for 60 years. Maybe back then it made a lot of sense to have your health care tied to your job. Does anyone actually think that makes sense now? When I started my first business, I was an entrepreneur before I ran for office. The only reason I was able to start that company was because my wife was working. We were starting a young family, and I had this idea for a business. I was responsible. I would not have left my job unless we had health care. But fortunately, my amazing wife, of 29 years, I love her to death, she was working at a company and she had health care. So I left my job and started a business. 3 years later, I was the youngest CEO in the history of the New York Stock Exchange and created thousands of jobs. I would have not done that but for the fact that my wife has health care. It always reminds me how many Americans are shackled to their job because of their health care. It's ridiculous. Health care is a basic human right. Everyone deserves it. But it's also smart economic policy. Somewhere out there, there's a bunch of John Delaney's like me, when I was in my early 20s, who have an idea for a business and it'll work and you'll create thousands of jobs. But they don't go do it because of their health care. But these are the things a progressive, forward-thinking society would have done. Last year, 71% of the high school graduates in this country were not eligible for the military, according to the Pentagon. That's 7 out of 10 high school graduates, either because of academic, health care, or social deficiencies. Clearly, we're not doing enough to invest in the basic public education system in this country. Because we all know our teachers are terrific. But not every kid in this country has pre-K. Poor kids don't have access to early childhood education, which is fundamentally the best investment we make. Many poor kids start public school having heard 1/3 of the words of other kids. We know our kids need something after high school, either community college or career or technical training as part of basic public education. But these are the kind of things you would have done if you were actually thinking about where the world is going. And you actually cared about doing the kind of things you need to do to prepare your citizens for that world. And that's what we have to get back to. Because we're leaving the next generation a world they do not deserve. Young people today will be the first generation of Americans who do not do better than their parents. The first generation ever. If you were born in the United States of America in 1950, the chances of you doing better than your parents was 90%. 9 out of 10 Americans. Fast forward to 1980, it's down to 50%. Fast forward to 2010, it's 20%. In one generation, we've watched the American dream disappear. We're leaving them debts that they cannot repay. Both fiscal debts and environmental debts in the form of climate change. Because that's what it is. It's a debt that we're passing on that they cannot repay. We're leaving them a political system that's so broken you have to worry, will every future political disagreement be met by almost a violent protest? Because 60% of the American people get all their news and information from social media, which is not journalism, is completely unregulated. And pretty soon they'll be able to take my picture, my voice, your picture, your voice, and impose it into completely realistic scenarios, right? Designed to fuel disinformation campaigns about what's really going on. The good news is we can address all of these things. This is a magnificent country. We have every possible advantage any nation could want to have in 2019. What we don't have are responsible leaders. Well, that's what we don't have. We don't have people who actually are trying to do the right thing for the right reason. I mean, look at our president. Look at our president. Right, we've allowed this to happen, but we have to take it back, and we can do it. We can absolutely do it. And we showed that in 2018. The roadmap is clear. We put forth great candidates for the House of Representatives. You know, because you flipped 2 seats here in Iowa with 2 terrific candidates. Those 2 candidates and the other 38 who flipped seats, they all ran as problem solvers. They all ran as people who wanted their constituents ahead of politics. Right? They all ran on working together, getting things done, and being responsible leaders. Right? Leaders who reaffirm this notion of the American dream. Right? You work hard, you play by the rules like I did. I mean, I was the first in my family to go to college. My dad was a construction worker. But his union also paid for half of my college tuition. Because I grew up at a time, like many of you did, when we had institutions like unions and a society that actually cared about people's success. We have to get back to that. We have to rebuild the social compact. But we can't do it unless we remind the American people of this notion that we're all in this together. You know, in 1958, then Senator Kennedy gave a great speech, and then I'll finish. He gave a great speech in Baltimore, Maryland. And he said, we should not seek the Republican answer, we should not seek the Democratic answer, we should seek the right answer. We shouldn't seek to fix blame for the problems of the past. We should own our responsibility for our future as Americans. And he gave that speech 4 weeks after Sputnik was launched. Remember Sputnik? Yeah. I know the teachers in the room do because you taught it. If you go back to 1958 and you read what the world was like after Sputnik was launched, the American people were panicked. They were fearful. They thought they had lost their future to the Soviet Union. But great leaders stepped forward and said, nope. Nope. Our future is ours to build. But we have to build it together as Americans. And that's where the Democratic Party has to be right now. We have to be the party that steps forward and shows the American people there is a better way. That we will be the responsible leaders that this country needs. Just like we've always stepped forward as a party. And reaffirm our core values, recommit to our model, and actually start being the type of leaders that the American people deserve. Leaders who are responsible, leaders who tell the truth, leaders who want to restore decency, and leaders that will remind the American people that this notion of common purpose, that we were all in this together, every one of us, is the beating heart of our nation and it's worth fighting for every day of our lives. This is our calling at this moment in time. Because if we do this, we'll win every election. And we'll be able to govern, and we'll start getting things done that matter to people. We'll fix and improve, we'll fix our healthcare system and create a form of universal healthcare. We'll make investments in public education so that pre-K through 14 becomes the new K through 12. We'll reform our immigration system, which hasn't been reformed since the 60s. We'll address climate change and get ourselves to net zero by 2050. We'll put in place privacy legislation, so your privacy and your data is yours, and they can't prey on kids, these technology companies. We'll change the fiscal trajectory of this country so that the next generation can actually pay the debts we're leaving them. We'll build infrastructure. We'll have policies that reverse some of the tremendous concentration of wealth, income, and opportunity. Last year in this country, 80% of the money for startup businesses went to 50 counties in this country. Think about that. There's 3,100 counties in the United States of America. 50 of them got 80% of the new business capital. But we'll fix all these things. And we'll fulfill our most fundamental responsibility, which is to leave the world better than we found it. That's what we're supposed to do. And we can do it. But we have to do it together. And the Republican Party is broken. So we have to step forward and save country. And in the process, I believe save the world. Because the world needs leadership. It's never needed leadership more than it does right now. And it needs a stable, responsible, progressive United States of America. And I'm running for president to lead that country. And answer any questions that anyone has.
We'll accept a couple questions here.
Yes, sir.
you started 2 businesses, took them both public, elected the House of Representatives. Right now, you're not doing so good. So how do you keep going? What motivates you?
Well, I'm married to an amazing woman, and I have 4 amazing daughters. And so that's actually what keeps me going at night, to be honest with you. My oldest daughter's getting married in a couple months, and I like the guy she's married. So that keeps me going. What's that?
And he has a dog.
Yeah, they're both journalists. I'm very proud of them, actually. Listen, I'll tell you why I'm running for president. Because the why really matters. To me, that's the most important thing. Right? I believe in my heart and soul that what I'm running on, which is to bring the country together, start solving some of these problems that we all know are solvable, and lead a country where we can rethink our future in a positive way. I really believe that. And listen, the odds have always been against me. Right? When I started my first business, you know when Donald Trump got $400 million from his dad? My dad helped me carry the furniture. Right? No one expected me to succeed. I was the youngest CEO in the history of the New York Stock Exchange. Right? I created thousands of jobs. My businesses were well admired, as you said, as you read my file. When I first ran for Congress, people said, "Oh, you can't win." The district had been gerrymandered for one person, literally one person. Well, there was the person I ran against in the primary, so it was gerrymandered. We said, "You can't win." Listen, I believe I'm going to win this. I believe what you all are going to figure out, in my opinion. Wayne Gretzky, the great hockey player, had a great line. You skate to where the puck's going, not to where it is. You know where the puck's going in our party? We have to beat Trump. That's actually all that matters. I mean, I hate to be that direct to you, but I believe that's actually all that matters. We have to beat him. And I believe we have to beat him with a candidate that can win the Senate. Because Trump's going to turn out his voters in huge numbers. And we all know that. But we're also going to turn out in big numbers, like we did in the midterms, no matter who we ran. Young, more experienced, socialist, moderate, woman or man, gay or straight, person of color or white. It didn't matter who we ran, we had record turnout. So this election is not going to be a turnout election. We're going to have a huge turnout. This election is going to be fought in the center, with the fastest growing part of the country, which is kind of these disaffected, unaffiliated independents, if you will. Some of them are Democrats, some are Republicans, but they're really independent. The candidate who wins that is going to win in 2020. And the candidate who wins that is going to be someone who can go toe-to-toe with Trump and kick his ass on the any day of the week. I'll put what I've done philanthropically against him any day of the week. I'll put anything in my hair against him any day of the week. But who knows? It may be better. We don't know what his hair really is. But I think I'm going to be in this to the end. I'm in the debates. I'm blessed with an unbelievable team here in Iowa. So we feel good.
Well, I'm very much the center, and I think that your message really resonates with people who are the center. And I wanted to thank you so much for co-sponsoring the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act to solve climate change, because leaving the environmental debt to my children and all Americans and the entire globe on the track we are right now is a huge problem. And that bill is a wonderful solution.
And I'll get that past my first year as president. This is putting a price on carbon and giving all the money back to the American people. Because it's all about coalitions. And the coalition that we need to get something done on climate are all the Democrats in the Congress, every one of them we got to get. And the Republicans who live in coastal states. Because we can't wait to get every Republican on climate, because we don't have time. And you're not going to get Grassley and Joni Ernst. Just don't, it's almost not. But some of you will get Marco Rubio and Rick Scott. Because they live in Florida. And a majority of Republicans, forget about Democrats, obviously 100% of Democrats in Florida think climate change. But like 70% of Republicans in Florida think climate change is a problem. So the way we got to deal with climate is say, okay, what can we do big right away that gets all the Democrats and all the Republicans in coastal states? Because there's like 10 of them, and that's what you need. And that carbon tax dividend structure does it. And then I'm announcing something else next week on climate that I just want to spend 2 minutes on because I'm incredibly excited about it. You got to bear with me before you hear it out. So I've called for the United States of America to launch the direct air capture industry. Direct air capture are technologies that actually suck carbon out of the atmosphere. They're like vacuums, and they work. The National Academy of Science just did a huge report on these things, proving that they're viable. The problem with them is they're too expensive. They cost $600 a metric ton to suck the carbon out of the atmosphere, and they're subscale. But you know, that's what we would have said about wind and solar 30 years ago. If I was standing here 30 years ago, with more hair on my head, I would have said wind and solar are great, they work, but they're too expensive. But what did we do? We created a market for them, and people invested in innovation and brought the prices down, and now you see wind turbines everywhere in Iowa. You see solar panels everywhere in Iowa. I think it's beautiful, actually. I'm calling for the same thing to happen with direct air capture. I'm calling for the $5 billion that we give in subsidies to fossil fuel companies every year, $5 billion every year, taxpayers directly to fossil fuel companies. That's $50 billion over 10 years. I'm calling for that money to be used to create a market for the government to purchase carbon and unleash a huge amount of innovation. And then I'm also calling for us to build what I'm calling Climate Throughway, which is, in fact, a pipeline that carries CO2, not fossil fuels, and it will be laid next to the existing natural gas pipelines in this country, so no new railways. And what that'll do is allow this industry of carbon capture to be created and located in the heartland of the United States to actually capture carbon and then transport it to where it can be used safely. Because we will not get to net zero by 2050, which is what we absolutely have to do, unless we remove 20% of the carbon from the atmosphere. We just can't do it. We have the best chance of doing it, and it's hard for us to do it, and the rest of the world's not even close. So the United States of America has to do, again, what we've always done better than anyone, which is solve a big problem with innovation. And so the carbon tax dividend massively slows down global warming and climate change. And then you pair that with massive innovation in battery, storage, and direct air capture technologies, and we'll beat this thing.
What are you going to say to farmers who want to talk to you about the effects of climate change and tariffs on their crops and what crops they usually grow and things like that?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say to them is I'm going to get us back in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Because that was a huge missed opportunity. President Obama was 100% right on that agreement. Right? 100% right. I was one of the few Democrats to support him on it. It was good for us economically, it's very good for farmers, and it was actually the way of dealing with China. Because you see right now with Trump, his whole approach with China, and he's right, we have a huge problem with China. We have a massive problem with China. But it's not the trade deficit. It's the fact that they've acted like pirates, and they just steal things. They steal intellectual property, they build illegal islands. They just haven't been held accountable for those practices. That's the problem with China. And the way to deal with China on the real issue is to work with our allies. And that's what the Trans-Pacific Partnership was about. It was about creating a 14-nation bloc of economic might that would have controlled 40% of Asia and competing with China. As opposed to what this president's doing, which is this go-it-alone strategy, right, where he's focused on the trade deficit. He's going to try to get him to buy a lot of soybeans and Boeing airplanes, which will shift the trade deficit for a short period of time. It'll probably put us back to where we were before he started this stupid thing. He'll claim victory, and he'll surrender the high ground to China. So what I'm going to say to Iowa farmers is you're going to have a president who's going to open up markets by getting you back in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is the number one thing you can do to help them. Because that's what they want. They don't want subsidies, they want markets. You know as well as I do. Yes, sir.
One of the things that is on me that I haven't heard any Democrats really focusing on is the deficit and the debt. And for me, that's topic number one. $1 trillion deficits are just unsustainable, and what's the plan?
And that's why we know that the Republicans in Congress are actually not conservatives. Because the way this whole thing's supposed to work is really simple. When the economy is good, deficits are supposed to be small. And when the economy is bad, deficits are supposed to be big. It's really simple. It's called counter-cyclical economics. Right now, we actually have a pretty good economy, and the deficits are skyrocketing because of the tax cut. So what I will do as president is change the long-term trajectory of the country so that the deficits are minus 2%. And let me tell you what I mean by that. The size of the deficit or the debt does not matter. What matters is its relation to our economy. Right? So right now our deficits are running at, call it, minus 4%. Meaning we spend 4% more than we take in. And our economy is growing well. It actually is growing pretty well. It's growing at 3% plus. What you need to have is your deficits be less than your rate of economic growth. Because if your deficits are less than your rate of economic growth, then your debt as a percentage of your economy goes down over time. So I will target deficits, and the only way to get here is through additional revenues and through fixing healthcare. Healthcare is actually the only number that matters in our long-term fiscal health. And I think the healthcare problem is like a 30-year problem. It's not a forever problem, and I'll tell you why. But you have to fix healthcare. So I have a plan to get our deficits down to 2 to 2.5%, which will be less than our rate of economic growth. And that will fundamentally mean that the young people will actually inherit a world where the debt as a percentage of our economy is less than it is today. But healthcare is what you have to fix. Right? You need more revenues, but you got to fix healthcare. The only way to fix healthcare is with a universal healthcare system. It's the only way to do it. And we really got to do it for the next 30 years. Because I think after that, we're actually going to be in a good place, and I'll tell you why. If you look at what's going on with innovation in healthcare right now, if you look at what computing power and big data is doing to healthcare right now, I believe some of the conditions we face now as a society that are driving up so much of our healthcare costs, we will cure. Right? I think in 50 years, people will thankfully be able to say things like breast cancer. People used to get breast cancer. That's amazing. I think they'll say Alzheimer's. Can you imagine that this was the most expensive disease that people have? My point is the unbelievable power of innovation, driven by the fact that these devices are 120 million times more powerful than all the computers that send someone to the moon, will ultimately allow us to innovate our way and cure these issues. But I think we're a couple decades away. In between now and then, healthcare costs are going to keep growing unless we have a universal healthcare system. Yes, ma'am.
Last question.
My name is Jill Shudak. Thank you for coming to speak with us, Congressman. I'm running for school board here in Bluffs, and I've asked every presidential candidate the same question, so I hope you don't mind. But the state of Iowa right now is under attack. From an education level, from a union level, what is your job to bring the unions back in this country and to get the money back into the public education sector so our children have a good foundation?
Well, you have to believe that workers have a right to organize, which I do. Listen, I grew up, as I said, neither of my parents went to college. My dad was an electrician. They weren't fancy people. We didn't have complicated political debates that you did. We didn't talk about socialism versus capitalism or trickle down versus redistribution. Well, I'll tell you what my dad did say. He goes, if you care about workers, you vote for the Democrats. Period. I heard that 1,000 times growing up. I drive my dad's pickup truck around Iowa. Right, he died 2 years ago. He always had a pickup truck. I have his last truck. I brought it out to Iowa, which is what I drive around. But I drove to all 99 counties. So, listen, even if I didn't believe in workers, workers, there's no way I'd go to bed at night and think up about my dad and never be able to look him in the eye in heaven hopefully one day. You know, I really care about people's ability to organize. It's a fundamental right. I put out a statement today about McDonald's workers. So that's really important to me. There's federal legislation, you know, to create national right to work legislation in the country. We got to push that back. Right? But we also have to have policies that really put the worker at the center of everything. So for example, for universal health care, and I think everyone should have health care as a right. Basic right, I got a whole plan to do it, and it's paid for, by the way, speaking of deficit. But I don't think it should be a single payer system. Because my experience growing up in my family is that my dad's union worked really hard to get good health care. It was actually the main benefit they were fighting for. And most people in unions like their health care. So I don't know why we're suddenly going to run as a party on this notion that you have to get rid of your health care and sign up for some government company. I mean, that's a terrible idea. It's also a bad health care policy. Right? Because Medicaid only pays 80% of costs, as you know here in Iowa. Medicaid doesn't pay enough. Medicare only pays 95% of costs. Commercial insurance pays 115% of costs. If you get commercial insurance completely out of healthcare and have a government-only system, we have no evidence to suggest that the government ever pays enough. Go to any hospital in this country and ask them what would happen last year if all of your commercial insurance bills were paid at the Medicare rate. Every one of them says we would close. So this notion of a single payer system is terrible politically, because we're going to have a lot of people, including union workers, who love their health care. We're going to say, we're going to take it away from you. You're going to go on a government website and get your health care. How's that going to go? And it's also bad health care policy. So in everything I do, I want to put the worker at the center. So when I think about universal health care, you can tell the first thing I think about is, okay, what about workers? I want to make sure everyone who doesn't have health care does it. But what about the workers who actually have health care? And it's one of the best benefits they have in life. Right? I want to make sure to put workers at the center. Can I squeeze one more?
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Because this gentleman had a question, and he had his hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, you had your hand up a couple times, I didn't get you, sorry.
I read your book, John.
Oh, good.
I like most of what you had in there. You talked about.
Most is good. As I say, we don't agree with each other on everything. It also was my voice a bit, so I
You
apologize.
talked about the problems. You talked about some solutions. What I'm missing from you tonight is you're not jumping on the solutions. You have the broad plan. And every night I look at the TV and I hear the politician, I've got a plan for this, plan for that, and I scream at the TV. How are you going to do that? I want to know what the basics are. How are you going to change all these things?
So I was ranked the third most bipartisan member of Congress. What's your name again?
Okay.
Kay mentioned, what's your name again, sir?
Richard.
So, Richard, Kay mentioned my carbon tax dividend bill, which I led on, which was bipartisan carbon pricing thing, right? Which shows how I'm thinking about things, which is, I love to step down as president and have tons of things be done, and I don't care if I get any credit for it, because it's all about getting things done. So let me tell you the three things I want to do to change how we operate here. The first, when I'm inaugurated, I want to look out at the American people and say I represent every one of you, whether you voted for me or not. And to prove it, in my first 100 days, which I think sets the whole tone of an administration, I'm going to focus on 5 or 6 things: on climate, on infrastructure, on immigration, on healthcare, and on digital privacy. And every one of my proposals will be based on an existing bipartisan bill in the Congress. I won't change a word. Because I want to say, look, your representatives, Democrats and Republicans, have found common ground on these things. That means we agree with each other, mostly on these things. So let's get them done. I want to call for national service, not mandatory, but a program side for young people. Young person wants to do it. After high school, they join the military, they do community service, they be part of a climate corps, going out and helping sustain the projects, or doing general infrastructure. I think that would bring us together. I've called for the president to debate the Congress once every 3 months on national television for 3 hours. It's like we were here. But you know why I need it? Because the truth has become elusive in our politics. 60% of the American people get their news from social media, which is not journalism. And so I think elected officials actually have to be more open and visible in a public debate so that people figure out who's telling the truth. And I think the president sets that tone. And I think if you're debating things out in front of the American people, they'll start figuring out who's telling the truth, and it'll become easier to find common ground. So I'm completely wired to get things done. And I've even thought how my whole presidency will unfold around this notion of finding common ground, having an inside and outside strategy. The inside strategy is how you work Congress. The outside strategy is how you work the American people. Because you need both those things coming together to get things done. Thank you. Thank you all very much.